Alright, start this again. Welcome back, folks. This is another episode of Folk Against the Machine. That is us. I'm your host, Joel Camille. This is the podcast. And cheers to you, my friends. I'm joining you from my side veranda, we might call it, at the historic Lowood Hospital in my hometown here in Queensland. And I'd like to welcome you back. I hope you have had a pleasant week. What has happened in your week? Tell me below. I'd love to know. Let me catch you up on mine. First things first, we launched episode 1 of the podcast last week, been steadily getting that out, making little grabs. You may be one who only interacts with the grabs that we take and put out in the feeds. In that case, welcome. This might be a grab right now. Look at me, I'm in your phone, you're scrolling and you're finding me. I'd like to welcome our listeners. Where have we got you listening? We've got some on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Amazon. Am I advertising for these companies? Maybe I should be quiet. You know where you're listening. And then the video version going up on the YouTube channel. So, welcome back. Folks, this week is all about saltiness. Yes, I might even make this episode purely about being salty. Now, what do when I say salty? There's an expression, in my children taught me this, colloquial diction in Australia, probably comes from Western culture abroad. To be salty is to be just a little bit pissed off about something, maybe a little bit unapproachable, maybe like a salty old sea dog. That's not what I mean when I say salty. I'm talking today about the words of Jesus in Matthew 5:13, where he said that you are the salt of the earth. In fact, I think I even prepared something. What have we got? Yes, we definitely have a preparation on this.
You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its flavor, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled on by people.
We might say you become sand if you aren't flavoursome salt. So I'd like to start with a Ravens analysis, which is something that we'll often do in this podcast, and it is in fact the reason why I have Ravens in the logo for Folk Against the Machine, the podcast. It is because I initially considered calling this podcast Ravens, until I realised that I wanted to do a little bit more than just a Ravens analysis. Now, what do I mean when I say Ravens? Folks, I happen to believe that the greatest teacher that humankind ever had was God himself, who became incarnate as Jesus, about 2,000 years ago in Palestine. And that's a really strange thing for God to have done. It's just a small part of the world and a small time in history, and it's a mystery of itself. But imagine there's a man floating around who has the knowledge of creation in his head, wants to share a very important message with the world, and chooses what the appropriate way to do that is. And he tended to do it with figurative language. He had a way of painting pictures with words, and after banging around with this idea in my head for a while, I wanted to find an acronym that would make this work. And so I have gone with Ravens. You see, everything that Jesus had to say to people was relevant to its audience. And in that sense, it was accessible as well. So it was an approachable idea that people could actually make sense of. And he didn't make it boring, folks. Why? Some of the things that he said would just shock you straight out of your seat. And so they were always vivid, memorable in that sense. You would actually get involved with what he had to say. It was engaging, noteworthy, did not waste your time, and then if your ears were painted on, you'd miss out on the subtlety of it. So what have we got? A Ravens analysis is where we take one of Jesus' figurative expressions, his use of figurative language. That could be metaphor, it could be a parable, it might be a simile that he uses, and we show how it is relevant, accessible, vivid, engaging, noteworthy, and subtle. Today I want to start with one of the first things that he pops out when he gives us the famed Sermon on the Mount, which I think from memory goes from Matthew chapter 5 through to 7. If you read nothing else of the whole Jesus movement, read the Gospel of Matthew from chapters 5 to 7, and you'll find all of his key messages there. Staring at a group of people who'd been following him around, maybe were hungry for some of his miracles, Jesus said to them that you are the salt of the earth. It's relevant to Jesus' audience because salt is a valuable commodity in ancient times, used for flavouring, preserving, disinfecting. So when he's speaking to the group around him, he's saying that you change the essence of the world which is around you. It's relevant. Salt is, in fact, what Roman soldiers were paid with at that particular time. It's an accessible metaphor. It's accessible to his audience because they're familiar with its uses and with its properties. Actually, he loves to mix his metaphors because by the end of this, he tells you about two different types of salt. A salt which is flavoursome and a salt which is lacking, and that lacking salt becomes just dirt, basically. It's just sand. People understand they've got to get out there and make a flavour difference to what is out there. It's vivid. It's tasty. This is a tasty metaphor. It conveys to Jesus' disciples the essential savour that separates them from dirt which gets trod underfoot. Do you know that salt is the only rock that humans eat? We need iron and niacin and calcium and magnesium. We need all these things in our diet, but we pretty well just go and chew this rock straight out of the ground. Nom nom nom. It's delicious. And so in that sense, salt comes from the earth. So for Jesus to look at people and say, you are the salt of the earth, he's being playful in his metaphor there because the earth already has salt. The difference between salt that's in the earth and salt that's been identified and produced from the earth is that someone has recognized its value and is putting it to use. Salt is distinguished from a mineral on the ground to a table condiment merely by a person recognizing its worth and putting it to use. Salt is put to work by relationship with the people who are going to find its use. So that's an important thing to remember. It's engaging because it catches the audience's attention. It invites them to reflect on their own value, their purpose in the world. It sets the stage for the rest of Jesus' teaching on the Sermon of the Mount. When I speak to you about salt having a distinction between being a mineral and being a commodity, it's because somebody has actually put some time into getting it together and preparing it and presenting it. This tasty metaphor runs deep when we realize that relationship is key. It's noteworthy, concise, memorable. This powerful image sticks with the audience and helps them to remember Jesus' teachings, their saltiness. I would say to you that the thing that really makes Jesus' followers salty is if they remember the things that he taught them and stick to them. Elsewhere he says that if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So what actually demonstrates for us that people are Jesus' people is if they are doing what it is that he has told them to do. He's told them to stay salty, stay flavoursome. And in comes the subtlety here, because we have this metaphor of the salt losing its flavour. It's a subtle way of conveying the importance of having internal qualities. Because how can you tell flavoursome salt from white sand? Initially, you can't necessarily. Have you ever been baking and can't tell if you've got salt or sugar? Or worse still, some kind of baking powder. You need to have a little taste to see what it is. The internal qualities that I'm talking about, that I think Jesus is talking about, are things such as character, virtue, faith. Without these inner qualities, a person's external actions are empty and meaningless, much like salt without flavour, which is just sand. Not even good sand, because when you add water to it, it turns to liquid. So without flavour, salt is, it's just a crystal. Doesn't have much use. The use of this metaphor encourages Jesus' audience to focus on their inner qualities and to ensure that they maintain their flavour by living a life of meaning, of righteousness, obedience to God. That's the important thing. Beyond themselves, which, remember what I said, table salt is table salt and not just a mineral in the ground, because somebody has taken it and prepared it and presented it. And in this metaphor, Jesus is referring to God as the person who prepares the table. It subtly suggests that external appearances and actions are not enough, and that true worth and value come from within. But it's not the salt that recognizes its worth, it's the person preparing the meal, the person presenting the wage, the person carting the commodity, the person mining the resource. That's the person who has assigned its value. And in this particular story, in this raven, we see that it is Jesus himself who is putting the metaphor to flight when he looks at people and he says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, I'd be surprised if you had not in your own travels heard that particular expression. When we say someone is the salt of the earth, we tend to say they're good people. Oh, they're good folks, they're salt of the earth. When someone's salt of the earth, what we mean is they're good folks. And this ties in with something that I try and bring home to us here at Folk Against the Machine, which is to say that your inner value is such that you ought to recognise your inner worth. You are worthy. You are enough, you are good, and you are lovable. Now, your goodness doesn't come from yourself. Saltiness doesn't come from itself. Salt is salty because it's been made to be that way. Once you start tying in some of the broader understandings of Jesus' worldview, we're told that without him, there's nothing which was made without him. He's the one who made you salty in the first place. He made you worthy in the first place. So your worth is not derived from your outward appearances, but from the intrinsic worth that is inside of you. Now, what I find amazing about these inspiring words of Jesus is that across the thousands of years they have inspired so many people to act and do. And it's not hard for me to find songs which are inspired by these figurative and creative ravens of Jesus. And in this sense, doing a little digging, I found a song called Salt of the Earth by Wes King. Came out in the 90s, I believe. Dug it up. I'd never heard this song before, but I went and dug it up and found it on YouTube. And I am going to play this song for you because it is a corker. Look him up, Wes King. You can find the song as a lyric video on YouTube. There's also a version of it which is just a still image of the album on which he released it. It's a beautiful song. I hope I do it justice. Hold on, let me slug my beer here. That's delicious. All right, let's go with Salt of the Earth. Okay. So hard to find you in your simple path, poor in spirit, pure in heart, thinking your life to be a small one, just living and trying to serve. You are the salt of the earth. Heaven came down for your work. Angels rejoiced at your birth. 'Cause you are the soul. You are the soul of the earth. Not to the mighty, not to the strong, but to the lowly and those who long for mercy and peace and righteousness. They shall be called sons of God. You are the salt of the earth. Heaven came down for your work. Angels rejoice at your birth. 'Cause you are the soul. You are the soul of the earth. Your crown awaits you in the kingdom come, to lay at the feet of the Lamb. You are the salt of the earth. Heaven came down for your work. Angels rejoiced at your birth. 'Cause you are the soul. You are the soul of the earth. Thank you, Mr. King. What a beautiful song. Ah, I love that one. I might even see if I can play that one at church. I do lead the worship at Fernvale Community Church. Feel free to come along. Our services run from 9:30 on a Sunday, and we're in the old Lions building, corner of Brisbane Valley Highway and Clive Street. You can find us there. If you're in our part of the world here in Queensland, you're welcome to come along. I'm not there every Sunday, and I don't lead every Sunday. I'm part of a team. But it is my favourite thing to do with my guitar, is to get along and lead God's people in worship. Another thing I love to do is talk, which is why I'm here chatting to you guys right now about how the week went. Now, keeping abreast of some of the things that are going on, I continue to engage and use AI in my career and find it particularly useful. Getting a lot of value out of ChatGPT right now, but actually GPT-4, I find that model to be particularly better with regards to its reasoning capabilities. And I would urge anyone who is still on the fringe or on the fence about AI to get in and learn about the skill of prompt engineering, because there's a basic concept which is floating around, summed up with the expression garbage in, garbage out. And what we mean when we talk about that is the value of what you get out of a prompt from one of these language models is directly related to the value of what you put into it. And that itself makes for an interesting metaphor when we're talking about the salt of the earth and having an internal worth, and flavourless salt being fit for just filling the streets and being trod on underfoot. Essentially, if you don't take your time with your prompts and you don't be deliberate in engaging with the AI, you can end up with something quite unusable which comes out of it. What I have quite a lot of success with is just engaging the language models conversationally, much as you would in speaking to a person, which is to say you need to be clear with your points, you need to give it a focus, you need to provide feedback on what results you get, and be willing to have this exchange where it goes one way versus another, one way versus another. And that's quite useful if you do it that way. One prompt which I find to be just masterfully useful if you are using GPT-4 or ChatGPT or the Bing search, Perplexity AI, whatever it is that you're using. These language models have a capacity to assist you in constructing the prompt, which is the input you put in. So a simple prompt that you can use is to say, as my prompt generator, your task is to assist me in constructing the most useful prompt for my needs. You will do this through a 3-stage iterative process in which you interview me with a range of questions to identify what my needs are, and then secondly, you make suggestions for the prompt. Thirdly, you feed back a revised prompt to me and continue the process until such time as you have ascertained that you have sufficient information to proceed with that prompt. Now, I've just pulled that one out of my head, and there might be a slightly more condensed version that I use, but essentially if you ask the language model to be your prompt generator and spit out a revised prompt at you, you can end up pulling that out as a copy text and saving that and using that prompt. There are people making money off this online, and you can jump on and use things like Prompt Perfect. There are prompt banks online where you can go and find, I've even been scrolling through Instagram and seen people trying to sell like that, suites of prompts which you can use to get quick and useful answers out of these language models. But realistically, guys, the fantastic thing that's happening in this information revolution is that access to information is becoming democratized. Everybody can get access to it. The language models can craft their own prompts. Give them a try and actually see. I might need to do, given that this is a podcast, screen sharing isn't going to be useful for everyone, so I think I need to remain descriptive in my language. But if you are tuning in via either Spotify or YouTube, you'll have that visual element where you can follow along, so I may well show you a thing. But let's move on to something exciting, a segment which I like to call Memes Mansplained. Welcome back here, folks, to Memes Mansplained, where we over-explain the humour in your favourite memes. And today's classic meme, oh, I love this one. It's the iconic 2 buttons meme. I like this one so much, I've used it for my students at school. I have a classroom rule which is make productive learning choices, and I've taken the classic 2 buttons meme and I use that. So what am I talking about here? Look, this meme, it's a classic. It originates from a 1990s Japanese game show called, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Uchan Nanchan no Hono no Challenge Koronai Mania. And yeah, I definitely said that badly. In a specific segment, a sweating man in a red t-shirt faces two buttons, each with a different option, implying he has a tough decision to make. Alright, people started using this image as a template, adding their own text to the two buttons. So in the classic use of the button, the text appears underneath the buttons, you see. Showcasing the difficulty of choosing between two options or ideas, beer or whiskey. I'm going to throw some behind me so you can see. Let's have a look. I'll be quiet for a minute. Classic. Alright, the meme often highlights paradoxes or conflicting options held by the same person, making it humorous. Now, what makes this meme so enjoyable is its versatility, allowing users to apply it to various situations where difficult choices arrive, from everyday life dilemmas to political and philosophical debates. Or in my case, I just get my students to make productive learning choices. Be on my phone, listen to Mr. Camille. What do I do? What do I do? Right. And there you have it, the two buttons meme, over-explained, dissected to your amusement. Join us next time as we continue to explore the world of memes on Memes Mansplained. Have I got music for Memes Mansplained? We'll just use the Folk Against the Machine riff, the sting, if you will. Alright, thanks for bearing with me on that one. I love that one. I love a good animated meme. What's great about this is it just represents the concept of choice all by itself, that particular meme. Now, I had the pleasure this week, let's go back over the week that was. I had the pleasure this week of having a monthly catch-up initiated by my brother, Josh, who lives in the States, the United States. Probably shouldn't let them just have the claim on states, but the United States of America. I believe he lives in North Carolina, and that's a long way away from us here in Australia, the rest of the family. So Josh has organised a way for us to catch up via FaceTime call. And my older sister Ohm joined us, and Dad hooked in, and none of the younger siblings this time, but Zach's been known to join in, and my sisters, well, I keep putting the invitation out there. It's just, gosh, there's like, how many of us are there? I lose count. Dad's got 7 kids. I'm one of 8. Full confession, I really have to stretch to remember the birthdays of all of my siblings. I might even struggle with middle names. Am I a bad brother? I don't know. I just have so many siblings. There's so many children. It's hard to keep track of them all. But interestingly enough, we had a really good catch-up, and some of the things that we discussed were the advancement in AI and the ethics of what's going on. Like, seriously, guys, do you realize that there isn't a job that a human can do that an AI-fused sort of and android being isn't going to be capable of doing better within a reasonable time frame? I'm talking like guesswork, because how would I know? My expertise is that I am a musician and I am a teacher and I've been a meat worker. I know how to kill things and cut them up. And even that will be replaced by robot slaughtermen in time, perhaps within the next 10 years. And as testimony to that, when I worked at the world's largest meat processor's big Australian abattoir, not a sponsor, JBS Swift is the largest protein producer on the planet, and their Dinmore plant is the largest beef processing plant in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's a funny thing to say, but it's one of the things that gets around there. They have had a hot cutter, a robot, who has been affectionately dubbed by the slaughterman on the floor there as Edward Scissorhands. He cuts the hocks off the cow, so the front hooves. And he's a robot, and he's taken the job of several people, and he works round the clock, well, on day and night shift. And Edward's been going strong for years. Like, we're going back over a decade since Edward moved in on the floor there. And they've tried a range of other robots. They've got some large robots that stack pallets down in their cold stores, and they've been going hard at it also for over 20 years. Just think in car manufacturing, we've seen videos of cars being assembled by robots on production lines for a very long time. What I'm trying to bring to your attention is that slowly artificial intelligence has been muscling in on us for years now. So go back to, I think, I'm not an expert, but I can remember a time from my childhood. Remember, I'm 41, so I became an adult in the last millennium. Yes, I remember before there was an internet. It's true. But I remember when computer first beat the world chess champion. Now, I'm reaching into my memory banks here, but I think the computer AI was called Deep Blue. I feel like IBM had something to do with it, and I don't know for sure. But what the world learned at that time was, wow, a computer is better than the best human at some particular thing. And really, I started learning to play chess from a book, and my brother and I would play against each other, and we were trash, but it didn't matter because we had similar skill levels. And then once we got stuck into working on a home computer, which my mum thankfully invested in quite early, I reckon, I think 1991, we had a household PC. It didn't run a lot, but it ran a program called Battle Chess. And Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? That was a game that I loved playing. Anyway, let's not get lost on the classics. Oh, Battle Chess was so captivating because it had little animated figures who would actually duke it out and have a little fight as you played the game. And even back then, Battle Chess, you had to select the difficulty that the AI could perform on because it was always capable of beating you unless you scaled it down to something near your level. Why am I talking about chess? Basically, folks, as specialized AI, it has long been capable of exceeding human capability for decades, and we're just comfortable with that. When you drive around, how many of you would take the directions by your navigation software, be it a TomTom or Google Maps or Apple, whatever, whoever you're using? It really doesn't matter because there's a whole range of them, but these are map navigation programs which direct you and update your route with live traffic information. Most of you would more comfortably take the directions of how to get somewhere from the AI than from a person sitting next to you or a person who even knows the way. If someone says go left here and it doesn't say to go left on the map, you would question them, right? I think I'll go with this isn't. And I've spent, again, grew up in the last millennium, so I learned to go places from what we would call a refidex. Ah, yes, young ones, let me tell you about the time of yore when we had a thing called a refidex. It was relevant only to a region, and you would have it underneath the car's driver's seat. You'd pull it out, and if they had not bought the latest one, in a place like Queensland where new suburbs were built, you might not even have the street that you're looking for on there. So you'd flip through this map, and you'd work out where you were and where you wanted to get to, and then you'd literally you might get a pencil out and you'd trace the map, and you'd do this little orienteering thing where you would plan where you were going to go. And if you were in luck, you would have someone who was handy in the passenger seat beside you as you drove there, navigating you. Often you didn't have someone, you're driving by yourself, so you just have that thing on the seat beside you and you're driving along and there's nothing to tell you to flip the page. You just have to be like, so you're reading street signs, you're paying attention, you're flipping along, and we would find where we would get to. Sometimes you'd get completely lost, but you would work it out with that. If you're unlucky, your co-pilot would be useless! And it was the source of amusement or arguments. It depends. When I grew up in Ipswich and we'd go into Brisbane, the one-way streets would just be maddening. Oh my God, it's not that hard. You just go in laps around Brisbane and you'll find your way, since learned. But when you were trying to follow it from the paper refidex and the streets, and it's new, and there's experienced drivers around you who honk rather rudely if you're in the wrong lane, because it's all about lane choices, then it could be quite stressful. Yeah, so the old refidex, you might have found a few thrown out the window because of driver frustration. But folks, once upon a time in the days of yore, we used paper to get to places. And of course, once you'd done that, you learned, if you're crafty, you learned to map your way with landmarks. As you're going, I'm going to pass that tree, that mountain's on that side, or the ocean is in this side, or at this time of day the sun is here. You'd work your way out. But today, we just rely on AI. And folks, it does pretty good, doesn't it? Does it not get you places and reduce some of the stress and make your life better? What we're heading towards is a stage where not just specialized AI is better than us. So not only will AI be better than us at playing chess and directing us to places, although on a side note, have you noticed that by default those map programs tend to send you somewhere via a toll road, even if you don't need to pay a toll? I call bullshit there. I think that actually there's a little bit of money under the table to those map navigation companies, and that's coming from the people who own the toll roads. Not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the major investor in toll roads in the Australian context is actually superannuation funds. I think. At least I read that somewhere. And in today's day and age, go and ask that in one of these updated generative models like Bing Search or Perplexity AI, and see if you can get an answer on that. See if I'm right. But I believe I heard somewhere once that superannuation funds are actually the major investor in toll roads. Swings and roundabouts, but just don't pay a toll if you don't have to. All right. Now, what I'm saying is the time will come when general AI is better than the best of humans, which is to say that artificial intelligence embedded in quantum computing and beyond, because we're going to even have some developments beyond that, but we're going to have the very best hardware and the very best software come together with robotics, and you're going to end up with these intelligent beings that are better at everything that we are. Honestly, there'd be a robot who could make a better podcast than me. And it wouldn't even need to be a robot, because it would just produce the audio and the visual and the topical ideas, and boom! I'm out of a job! What do I do then? You know what I do? I hang out with you fine people. Yes, so within 10 years I plan to retire. I hope to be independently wealthy, but wealth may well have been decimated and made irrelevant by that point. You may not need wealth when all you need is a 3D printer. You plug it in, it prints a robot who does everything for you. It's going to be exciting, I tell you. All right, what is approaching is something that we call the singularity, when artificial intelligence becomes so much more intelligent than the corporate intelligence of humanity combined, to an order of magnitude which will be alarming. We're talking about interlinked artificial intelligence, which is 1,000 times more intelligent than the smartest human who ever lived, which has access to everything that we're doing right now. Imagine it's got all of YouTube's history, all of Twitter's history, all of the internet's history, folks. And every time you ever asked directions to Google Maps or whatever it is. Do you know that Google's recording you when you OK Google? Go back and search your Google history. It's quite a fun day. Sit around with your beer and go back. I can't remember how. Just go work it out. How do I find my Google history? You can go back and find out everything you ever Googled with your Google account. Hint, hint, for those with children, you may want to clean it up a little bit. Just saying, you can go back. Yes, you can delete things from your history at present, but they're not actually deleted. That data just is not locatable on your account. It's still out there, people. Everything you ever Googled is there. And that's maybe a frightening concept for some. But I want to take you across to a different concept, which is to say, from a Christian worldview, we believe that the creator of all things will call all users before him at one stage. And remember all of their deeds, small and great, and every idle word. Jesus said that every idle word will be held to account, which is to say that it really doesn't matter what you ever said. There's nothing which is secret will not be revealed at one point in time. So don't think you can pull a Swifty. Yes. Yeah, that thing you're thinking of, I'm probably thinking of it too. Whatever it is, bacon, delicious. Anyway, I digress. When the singularity occurs, we will have autonomous robotic androgynous beings who are capable of doing anything better than we are. And that will be a time when humanity will essentially, some are concerned, consign itself to irrelevance, or maybe we'll actually be able to focus on what's important. What's important right now is to try and get these new developments out to as many people so the input that's going into this artificial intelligence is representative of humankind and humanity's needs. And let's not just be selfish. What about biological needs? What about the needs of other species? We're in the middle of a mass extinction at the moment, people. Are you aware? For those of you who are young, let me tell you that when I was younger in Australia, there were so many more insects than what there are now. You'd go for a drive and you'd stop, and country drive, there'd be all sorts of bugs splattered to the front of the car and the windscreen. And I've heard some people argue that, oh, no, cars are more streamlined now, so they don't stick to the grill as much. But I'm telling you, folks, I'm sitting out here at, what's the time? It's presently 20 to 6. The sun is going down over there. You can see that the sky behind me, if you're watching, you'll just have to trust my description. The sky behind me is darkening because it's twilight. And I saw one insect crawling upon my book. I can see one mosquito to my right. That is I should have been getting plastered with insects out here. When I was a kid and I'd sit out, even in town, and I'd sit outside at this time of year, I would be getting mobbed by a lot of insects. They'd be coming in at the light that I've got going. I've got a ring light going here. I've got another one up there. Now, there's a few around, but no, when I was a kid, there were so many more. And what I'm trying to point out to you is that shit is dying at an alarming rate. And we talk about human rights, but what about the rights of the planet? Imagine, if you will, and I'm borrowing an idea from someone here, there was a giant set of scales capable of holding all the organic representatives of a species on the planet. And on one side, you put all of the chickens. And on the other side, you put all of the other birds. We're talking the kiwis and the emus and the sparrows and the ostriches and the ducks and the tits, which is actually the boobies. I believe both of those are birds. What's going on with that? Anyway, all of that's on the other side, right? The puffins and the plovers, just a full like Noah's Ark of birds, right? On the other side, the ravens. How did I forget the ravens? They're all like sitting. They're not flying. They're sitting on the other side of this scale. Do you know what? The chickens, this one species of bird, would outweigh all of the other bird life put together. Go and find out if I'm right. Google that. Perplexity that. ChatGPT that. There are more chickens than there are the rest of bird kind. And then ask yourself why. It's to feed our stomachs. Started a bit of an exercise this week, a new routine, because some of my dad bod's getting out of hand. So, yeah, I actually need to go a little bit less of the good stuff, a little bit more of the discipline. Now, be alarmed, because there should not be that many chickens, okay? That's too many. The planet can't sustain that. And what we are doing with our mono species production is actually destroying our planet. We are actually actively terraforming the earth with a method of desertification, which is to say that we are taking prime areas, and by just repeat running single species of grain, of say, corn or wheat or banana trees or cows or sheep or pigs or chickens, right? We are destroying our planet. And folks, when I say that there isn't a job that AI isn't going to be able to do better than us in the future, I'm including farming there too, and planning, infrastructure. If this is Sim City, and if you don't know what that is, if this is some simulation model, a computer is going to do better at actually creating societies than what we are. It's alarming, it's frightening, I know it makes you feel uncomfortable, but the simple fact of the matter is, the agricultural revolution, that's probably not what they call it because they refer to... Okay. When humanity started its current farming practices, that happened in a place called Mesopotamia, which basically means food bowl, and it's supposed to be the food bowl. If you go and look up the state of the Euphrates River at the moment, which is one of the rivers that was supposedly flowed from Eden in the Bible, it is dry, and when I say Mesopotamia, I'm talking about Iraq, Afghanistan, that part of the world, the bit that's full of deserts. That was once the food bowl of the region. That's where we domesticated the cow and started ploughing fields and created monoculture, where we're growing wheat and corn and that kind of thing. And it's now a desert. Because if you continue just growing single species in a single place, you actually remove essential minerals like the salt of the earth, but not the salt, the other things. You actually remove what's there, and it doesn't get replaced, and you don't have this full ecosystem, and you end up with a dry desert. And nowhere else in the world is that more relevant, really, than in Australia, where, go and look at the work of, I think it's Bruce Pascoe. He's written a book called Dark Emu, where he just goes to a library and reads the accounts from colonial settlers of Australia about what things they found when they went out there. And essentially, Australia was a far more sustainable natural environment before Europeans just let hordes of sheep and cattle just go out and eat all the natural grains, because the First Nations people had ways of interacting with the land and sculpting the land, which kept it replenishing resources. And when we just let mobs of our mono species get out there and just eat everything in sight, it destroyed what was there. So the droughts and the dry, the sunburnt country, a land of sweeping plains and dusty, the way Australia is a messed up version of what it was. And it's monoculture that's to blame. So when I talk about AI being more capable than we are, it's able to factor in all of the things that I've just spattered at you and incorporate that into a plan to actually make the world a better place. You should be excited when the singularity occurs. Big changes will and must come because humans are killing the planet. We are destroying the thing that we live on. We're destroying our own home. Do you know how fucking mental that is? Do you know how stupid that is? We are so dumb. We are ridiculous, okay? What an exciting time to be alive, because the computers may well set some of that stuff right. Now, folks, I digress. It's getting to the point where I should wrap it up, because I can see the 45-minute mark approaching, and that's about what an episode is. So, peace and love to you all. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And remember, we do not need to be as different as people say that we are. I speak from a Christian worldview. I don't push that on anyone. That's what gives me value, helps me sleep well at night, get out of bed, live with a purpose, and know what I'm going to do when the robot takes my job. I know what I'm going to do. I know what I look forward to. But I want to engage with all ideas and people from all walks of life. We are the folk against the machine. The machine is coming! The machine is coming! It's okay, one more comparison. Imagine that you're back in colonial Australia and the British have arrived. This big weird ship with technology. It's just not part of our culture. We don't understand it. What is all this stuff? We don't know what it is. The robots are here. Now, you do what you want to do. You go and be like yourself. You do what you're going to do. I, personally, am going to befriend these robot masters and become their guide. I'm coming with my robot friends. Yes. We may as well enjoy the last little bit of freedom that we have. Get together. All right, people, give me some comments and I'll steer us in another direction. Next time for Ravens, I might do Light of the World, which is a beautiful follow-up to Salt of the Earth. But be the salt of the earth. Be full of flavour. Be tasty. Be darn tasty. Be the thing that people want to add to the dish. This needs a little salt. It needs a little you. It needs a little you. Get out there and be the you that you know that you need to be. Hold on, I've got so much beer left. I'm going to go enjoy it. I'll play us out. Folks, it's been a pleasure. Thank you to Wes King for the wonderful song that we played today. All right, peace out. Love to you all. Be kind. Find the stop button, Joel. Where is the stop button here? Peace out, folks.